encourage everyone to be creative. So I'm going to talk a bit about creativity for its own sake. When you do small press, a lot of people tend to ask you how much money you make doing it, and they're often less than impressed by the reply. The idea that it's only worth being creative if it makes money, and that financial gain indicates creative worth, is a depressingly prevalent attitude in our society, which is odd since it's also an easily refutable point of view. Who here will argue that Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen is the year's finest film? You might be one or two, actually. The worst result of this attitude is that we've lost any sense of the value of creativity in itself, its value to our mental and spiritual well-being, and to the health of our society. The 19th century art critic John Ruskin believed that everyone should draw regularly, whether they showed any aptitude for it or not. He argued that drawing developed a person's ability to look at the world around him, and that the ability to look enhanced one's ability to live, to enjoy life, to understand the world, and to reason. Similarly, the act of writing clarifies a person's point of view, develops their critical ability, and makes their mental processes apparent to them. Ultimately, whether the result of a person's labour is of a high quality or not is irrelevant if it has enriched their life. As well as being good for the individual, the social benefit of DIY is not to be underestimated. Even if the things made are only distributed to friends and family, nevertheless the habit of making one's own culture has begun, and habits have a tendency to become rights in time. Instead of constantly absorbing culture through mediums like TV, cinema and video games, which only offer a passive, or at best limited creative role, DIY offers the opportunity to reverse the flow of culture, so that it is not something only to be consumed, but to be generated as well. The joy of small press is that you can do anything, no matter how silly, weird or contentious, and represent any point of view, not only that of the elite, which is what mainstream culture represents. There are plenty of people who will tell you that there has never been more opportunity for people to express themselves and disseminate their ideas. Blogs, Facebook and Twitter, these people argue, have made it possible for everyone to become an author. But how creative are these new forms of publishing? Most have some kind of mechanism of content control. All of them are open to advertising in some way, and the limitations of Twitter would surely daunt all but the most disciplined haiku writer. You can't sprinkle glitter on a blog. You can't make a hand lino cut blog on brown paper. Walter Benjamin talked about the loss of the aura of the work of art in the age of printed material. In the present age, when most images we consume don't even exist physically, the surprise we feel when we handle something handmade is palpable. You might call it the shock of the old. On Saturday we'll be hosting the Collaborama, a big experiment in local cultural production. Anyone who cares to can contribute to the publication, written, drawn, printed, folded, stapled and distributed during the course of the event. Our hope for this event, as with our festival as a whole, is that it will serve as a demonstration of how easy and fun it can be for a group of people to make a small press book, to encourage and involve those who never thought of themselves as artists, and to consider their creative potential regardless of whether they are likely to make money out of it or not, to consider creativity in itself as reward enough. Cheers.
Thanks very much, Gareth. Just want to say now, has anybody got anything to say on that? Any just opinions, or do they make you think of anything, or any comment at all? About the importance of expressing yourself as opposed to just absorbing what's thrown at you. Probably a lot of you make your own stuff. Yeah? I mean, I certainly find watching TV or media and stuff that it very rarely speaks to me, and I think this idea of self-expression, often you meet people talking about things more prevalent to your own life where you can relate to it, you know? Yeah.
Some thinkers out there in the audience.
Yeah,
Who in the audience does their thing?
Yeah, who's in the book? Hands up who's in the book. And does anyone want to say anything about their experiences of self-publishing? Because it's a hard thing to do, and the rewards are kind of limited. Why do you do it?
Well, I thought that was really interesting, that quotation from John Ruskin, which I'd never come across before, but I pretty much agreed with most of the things that you said, and it just really, because what was he, a Victorian?
Yeah, he was a kind of Victorian
art critic. Yeah, so that kind of really, because we kind of think of that era as the time when a lot of those ideas of what counts as canonical fine art or what counts as culture were kind of established. But that's quite interesting that he would have said that, because I'd heard of him and I think I'd always assumed he was very much one of those old guard kind of writers.
Do people think there's less self-expression in the arts than there was, like, I don't know, 10 years ago or whatever? Do you think there's any change, or is it like a constant thing? There's always this thing of the mainstream and the...
I think it is a constant thing, yeah. I mean, going off what John Ruskin said, I've been an artist since I can pick up a pencil, essentially. That's the way I think about it. And when people ask me, you know, what do you do and stuff like this, I said that anyone can draw. If you can draw a circle, you can draw.
Yeah, yeah.
And I agree that everybody can draw. And you should draw every day, and I think and I do. And if I don't for a bit, I start to feel it.
Yeah.
So that's basically what I want to say.
Well, I definitely think there is something to, like, what you just said about not feel. I don't really feel like myself if I go for a long time without drawing or writing or something like that. I do start to feel quite out of sorts, and I just wonder how
it's just another way of communicating. It's like if you didn't speak for a week, you'd feel it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's the same thing.
But people are so quick to say, I can't draw.
Because they can't draw something that looks like it.
Don't you think, like, you have this thing, like this flow of culture, it just sort of gets dumped on you? And a lot of it seems to be like whoever's the most powerful in society tends to reflect their values in general. This sort of self-publishing, whatever you're into, that's pushing things more about your life out there. I definitely find that. All these things like a Keira Knightley film, like, I've got no interest, it don't relate to my life now. It does relate to some people.
Depends on the Keira Knightley.
Yeah.
But
I have a question about, maybe missionary work would be the wrong question, but how do you feel about going maybe to schools where kids of lower classes, to say so, go and kind of teach them about that? Because I feel that intellectual people have this understanding of the world anyway, but the victims of a society who's against these values are actually those who are never exposed to something like, come on, go draw, go outside, look at a flower. Do you do that? Do you actually...
Jimmy, you've stand up for this one there, because Jimmy was very keen on what you said.
Because I work in a primary school, and in the, after these events, after we've taken a bit of a break, we're going to definitely do more stuff, and one of the things we're hoping to do is to go into schools and do like zine making workshops, and teach those kids that there is a media that is theirs, and they can do what they want with it, and they can express themselves creatively, because I think that's part of the problem. There's no way in for these kids,
Exactly.
And these kids aren't taught, they aren't groomed for like academic success, they aren't groomed to go and write a book, and if there's like a creative one of them, they must be really frustrated throughout most of their lives, thinking, if they do get to that stage of writing, sending off to editors and stuff like that. But with like zines and self-publishing and small press, they can do whatever they want. We want to kind of expose them to that at a young age, so that like they know that it's possible, they know that anything's possible, and then they can go and take it and do what they want with it.
I think that idea of sort of showing people that the media can be theirs is a big one, because there's a lot of merit to all the stuff like